The PLA, in theory, should have been one of the most powerful militaries in the world. On paper, everything looked great. A rapidly increasing military budget, a modernization program driven by domestically produced hardware, and of course, a massive population to wield it. They even had managed to get their first aircraft carrier functioning. But that was just on paper. The reality was a bit more complicated. In truth, the average Chinese soldier was poorly equipped, lacking basic protection and communications equipment. The military's command structure was even worse. There was no well-trained NCO corps, the backbone of any modern military, and the officers had no combat experience and were oftentimes appointed because of family or business ties. Each company-sized unit had political officers appointed to make sure soldiers remained loyal, which only further decreased morale. The Chinese military had all the furnishings of a modern military, but in truth it was designed to keep the Chinese people in check and line the pockets of its leaders. But as order fell apart and political appointees and opportunists fled the front lines, a miraculous thing happened. Individual soldiers, privates, and corporals began taking charge of units and mounting a defense that could only be described as heroic. Although the system was broken, these trying times brought out the best of the Chinese people. And as unlikely allies from all around the world came to China's aid, the First Order advance had been stopped, and new lines had been drawn. When the Chinese soldiers finally had a chance to take a break and look at their new comrades, they were shocked to find Indian, Japanese, American, and even Taiwanese soldiers standing side by side with them against the alien onslaught. Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. This is part 6 and the final part of our First Order vs. Earth series. Last episode, First Order allied nations declared war on what countries were remaining still outside of the alien coalition. Kylo Ren had emerged out of the shadows and had offered General Hux a solution to his problem. And the Wookiee Jalkala, who was working for the United States government, managed to contact resistance forces in a nearby solar system. On the battlefield, it was rare to see the telltale white helmets of a First Order stormtrooper. But whenever you did see one of these shock troops, soldiers knew to expect an orbital bombardment shortly. The damage these attacks did was unprecedented. There's no shelter from the giant hot balls of plasma. The only chance of survival was to run. The Chinese and their allies had developed a counter-strategy. Whenever one unit or theater of war was being bombarded, other fronts would launch attacks hoping to draw the attention of the First Order ships. It was like one giant deadly game of whack-a-mole. The First Order suffered heavy casualties as well. Blasters were effective, but at long-range firearms were better. And the stormtroopers' armor and helmets didn't stop bullets any better than modern body armor with trauma plates. And the First Order's allies were often poorly armed and trained, and were only used to fighting in fortified fixed positions. The US forward operating base in Puerto Rico had intercepted a message from deep space. It had a type of encryption no one had ever seen before. Joe Cola was called in and he quickly identified the message as being spoken in Shiriwook, the native tongue of the Wookiees. And better yet, it was his uncle, who apparently was a great warrior and leader in the resistance, that answered him. Joe Cola quickly translated the message. The resistance would be arriving in under a day. They would attempt to breach the Resurgence battlecruiser and take control of the inhibitor control device, but they would need help taking down the massive ship's shields. The finalizer was safely outside the range of Earth's anti-satellite missiles, but there was one other delivery vehicle that could potentially reach them. In the last few months, NASA had begun refitting several space shuttles as delivery vehicles for ICBMs. Neither the missiles or shuttles were designed to function beyond low orbit, but neither had the space shuttles led by Bruce Willis and Ben Affleck in an effort to save Earth from a giant asteroid. The First Order docking bay commander had given Kylo Ren permission to proceed with this landing. Behind him in his shuttle were a dozen of his best operatives, including several barrels of explosives. Every member of the team had a camera mounted in their clothing, recording the events that would unfold in the next half hour. So far, things had looked good. Hux was too arrogant to even scan Kylo's ship. The general waited on the bridge for Kylo's entourage to arrive. He had specifically instructed the traffic controllers to direct Kylo Ren to a docking bay that was the furthest from the bridge. He also wanted the bridge crew to see that Snoke had finally appointed him as second in command. Kylo had donned his mask again. There was no need to make things appear out of the norm. First, he would have to meet with the general, and then he would carry out a demonstration with his men. It was only after that they would be given free reign of the ship, and they could proceed with their mission. When he finally arrived to the bridge, Kylo ignored Hux's aide and guards and strode up to the general, stopping within only a few feet of him, just close enough to make him feel uncomfortable, but not close enough as to show disrespect. Hux welcomed his former rival and offered him and his men a place to stay. Tomorrow he would review these operatives of his, and together they would come up with a plan to quickly eliminate what was left of the resistance on Sol 3. Something strange was happening on Sol 3. The First Order had detected more than 36 simultaneous rocket launches from the United States, Canada, Poland, France, United Kingdom, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. It's far too many launches for the First Order to keep track of, so what they did instead was put their ships on high alert. Out of all the rocket launchers, only 4 weren't decoys. These were the space shuttles Atlantis, Discovery, Endeavour, and the Enterprise, which ironically never had flown into space prior to this. Inside each shuttle were 4 missiles attached with warheads. It was their hope that the EMP blast from several nuclear weapons would be able to turn off the ship's systems and give the Resistance an opportunity to land several boarding parties and take control of the inhibitor chip control system. It was important that they didn't cut the signal completely, because if they did that, everyone that was connected to the inhibitor chip system would die. Black Squadron was eager to get back into the fight. Rumors were they were about to attack General Hux's own flagship. The X-Wings would be flying cover for several Resistance shuttles that were supposed to board the ship. As they reverted to normal space, they saw a battle already in progress. 3 spherical balls of energy were expanding near a Resurgence-class battlecruiser, and when the light reached the ship, the shields began to flicker and the lights began powering down. There were cheers over the comm, and Black Squadron began their attack run, but just before they got within range, a backup generator kicked up and the shields were once again on. Black later cursed and turned away, canceling their approach, when a small explosion erupted at the stern of the ship, followed by a dozen more explosions, and suddenly the ship's shields were not only down, but there were now also several breaches in the hull. Kylo Ren was in his room when the explosions began all around him. He smiled behind the mask. He had trained his men well. He felt the ship begin to list to one side. The planet had grabbed hold of the finalizer. If General Hux was smart, he would already be looking for an escape pod or a shuttle. If he landed on Sol 3, he would connect with remaining First Order troopers. But the imminent destruction of the finalizer and the inhibitor chip control system would cause the death of Hux's entire Sol 3 army. He would be left alone with a few thousand troopers at most. Kylo would release the footage of him and his heroic crew taking down the finalizer. He would return to Earth as a hero. The people would begin to listen to him, and the Force, that would take care of everything else. With a wave of his hand, the political world would be his to dominate. Suddenly, the door to his chamber opened, and there stood General Hux and a squad of First Order troopers. They began firing on Kylo immediately, but he was faster. In a few quick steps, he had closed his distance and was now standing 3 meters from Hux. As Kylo split Hux's body cleanly into 2, a new party arrived. It was Kylo's mom, leading a band of tough soldiers. Leia was old now, but her voice carried the same blend of royalty and steel that made people obey. The 2 First Order troopers still left slowly gave up on their weapons. Leia walked forward, with the confidence only mothers can have of their sons. Kylo Ren drew back. He wasn't prepared for this conversation. But as he grew closer, Leia's features warmed, glowing with unconditional love. She wanted Kylo to come back. She didn't hate him for killing his father. She hated herself for not being there. She had put the needs of the galaxy and the Republic before the things that truly mattered. And Ben had suffered needlessly for that. She opened up her arms to embrace her son. She tried hard not to betray the fear and hesitation she was feeling inside. Kylo's head exploded in a burst of flame and liquid. Chewbacca stood in the doorway, bowcaster still raised in firing position. Leia looked back at Chewie in horror as Kylo's headless body went limp and fell to the floor, revealing the lightsaber he had been holding behind his back. Chewie, not completely understanding how the human body worked, walked over to Kylo's headless body and unleashed several more bolts into it. As the First Order abandoned ship, a team of Resistance techs had been able to neutralize the signal. People all over the planet were given their freedom back. As news around what had happened began emerging on the news networks, the most sensational and exciting video online was Kylo Ren killing General Hux and then being shot by a Wookiee. Kylo was immortalized as a hero, someone who was able to come to Earth's aid at its most trying times. After hearing about the late hero's love for My Chemical Romance, the band reunited for one last time to perform at his funeral. Well guys, that is the end of the First Order vs. Earth series. The First Order is a powerful military force, and while their individual units were most likely improvements on the Galactic Empire, they really lacked the manpower to occupy a planet like Sol 3, and would resort to more subtle ways to achieve victory. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to hit that subscribe and notification button. And if you have the means, please check us out on Patreon and help fund this channel. Videos like these Versus series are extremely hard to do, and oftentimes we don't get that many ads for them. Anyway guys, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation 10.